Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a gal on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are committed to changing the world of publishing one personal contact at a time, one character transformation at a time. Welcome to my podcast. Yesterday we left off with the concept of courage. It's from a book that I've just started reading. I won't go through that again. But the interesting point, it began with a note of Joan of Arc was listed in the names that the book referenced. One reference. So I turned to it on page 201, and there we found that in a list of paragons of courage, Joan of Arc was named first. So that's a rather interesting point, and it made me reflect a bit on the role of courage if you're a fiction writer. If you're a fiction writer and you want to draw upon a study of character traits and values and virtues to create believable living characters, then I'm here to tell you something a little bit heretical. Courage to the fiction writer is useless. I said it. Useless. It's far too broad. Courage, you might call it fortitude, you might call it resilience. I tend to call it resilience. But it's broken down into a number of character traits. What you're looking at with resilience, fortitude, courage, call it what you will, is a constellation of character traits. So why is that important? Why would you say that a constellation of traits is useless, but the individual traits are valuable? Say it has to do with communication. Suppose you walked into a room and your character is just awed by the incredible scene that he sees around him, and he looks and he said, "Ah, there's colors." That's useless. If you want to express the awe that someone felt looking at an incredible choice of colors in a room, you better name them. What an amazing mix of blues and greens and little bits of purple accent. Oh my gosh, it was a stunning color scheme. But you better name them, because you can't just go in and say the room had colors. It doesn't evoke anything in your listener, in your reader. And that's the very problem that you have with courage. It's too broad. It's a constellation of character traits. True enough, if you have someone who is a paragon of courage, there's a very good chance that that character has all of the character traits in the constellation. But what's memorable to our reader are the individual traits. So, let me go through them very briefly, because we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but I have a chart of the components of resilience. Let's just look at the three over here on the right, because they're the ones that we most often think of as being components of courage. The big one over here is perseverance. Perseverance has to do with getting your grit together to surmount an obstacle in your path. You've got somewhere that your character wants to go and be and become, and there's a barrier in your character's path, and he has to have the grit to overcome it, the strength, the tools, whatever. That is the character trait of perseverance. And you can bring that up in the heart and the mind of your reader by demonstrating the obstacle. the path was smooth and clear, and he was so confident that he would be there before nightfall, when suddenly it terminated at an enormous cliff. Okay, you put an obstacle in the path of your character, and you've put an image, not just in the conscious mind, but also in the subconscious mind of your reader, your listener. Let's look at another one. Constancy. Constancy is that element of courage that deals with the daily slug. It's the same today, tomorrow, to the next day. It's just the tedium of getting through the grind. Any hero on the hero's journey is gonna have to have some constancy, because there are going to be places in the story where it just seems to go on forever. And the amazing thing is, you won't have to take your reader page after page after page after page of going on forever, because you can demonstrate that rather quickly in rather few words and bring up that feeling of what it takes to get through that tedium in the mind and in the heart of your listener, of your reader. The last one that we'll look at today is patience. Patience is a fair amount like constancy and perseverance. But patience has something different that you don't see in these two. Patience is something that you're stuck overcoming, maybe a barrier, maybe a tedium, but it does not seem to be on the path to where your character is trying to get. It's merely something that your character has to get through. It's the suffering that the character has to go through right here, right now. And the interesting thing is, if your character in perseverance has to climb down a cliff, that takes perseverance. But when he's going from rock to rock, and his hands are getting beat up and torn up, and his knees are getting very, very tired of gripping rocks, that takes patience. So these tie in together very closely, and collectively they make up the constellation that we would think of as courage. Although with Joan of Arc, you can't miss magnificence, even though we won't go there today. So that's my point. I am trying to bring all of these tools that come out of philosophy, from Aristotle, Aquinas, down through the ages, and are now being very deeply studied by psychology, and bring them into the world of fiction writing. And we find out that when we do that, we have to be a little bit more careful, because there is a communication gap that we're trying to bridge. And that means we have to be very, very precise, because as authors, we don't want to tell them. We want to show them, and we don't just want to show the conscious mind. We want to evoke the emotion in the subconscious mind. And that takes knowing the right details. Thank you. See you tomorrow.